Hey Peaches, what's up? Today I am doing my very first Forensics Friday. I'm a little bit nervous because I really want to make sure that the way that I talk about these cases is respectful to all the parties involved. And I just wanted to make clear a few things before we get started talking on what we're going to be talking about today. Complete side note, this is crazy back here. Also, there's a baby doll that does look like a human baby, but it's not. I'm gonna move it. It's not real, but he's really realistic. His name is Matthew. I bought him for $100 when I was like 8. Literally the only possession I was able to escape my parents' house with. Okay, so I, first of all, don't think that I coined the term, that I came up with the concept of like makeup and murder, Forensic Friday, anything like that. I am not at all trying to be like, yay me for inventing this concept. I will say that I don't typically watch the makeup and murder side of YouTube, only I guess because I just get recommended videos of like, watch this case, and so I just watch that. I'm saying that because I don't really know how these cases and, you know, murders and everything are typically discussed on these kinds of channels. I just put some dry shampoo in my hair. She is flat. I don't know how they're typically discussed, but for me, how I want to be discussing these kinds of things, whenever I watch a case, what's most interesting to me is not the actual event, but more the justice system, the evidence, the DNA, how people are convicted, if they are wrongfully convicted, which happens all the time. So kind of like the literal case, like happening, the sentencing and everything like that is what's most interesting to me. I like justice system and I like when it works correctly, and the reason that I get so intrigued by watching so many of these is because it works incorrectly so often and does not get caught so often. The other thing I want to say before we get started is I feel like a lot of these cases, a lot of cases in general today, draw tons of attention, and they're not because the focus is not on the victim, it's on the accused, it's on the guilty. I think that's so sad that sometimes it's like you've heard of a case, you heard of who did it, you heard of how long they're in prison, but you have no idea the name of the person that they killed or anything about them. And I don't think that's right. I think these stories are not the accused stories, they're not the guilty party's story, they're the victim's story, and it's being told through the eyes of someone else. I just don't think it's fair. So I would like to start when I talk about this and include, especially if it doesn't seem to be prevalent in the cases, something about the victim. Long intro. I hope that you guys like this kind of thing. This is not like uncomfortable for me in like talking about it. I feel as though if you know me, this is a weird, well, if you know me, I guess it's not weird. I'm just saying maybe my personality isn't someone that's like obsessed with forensics, but I truly am. And normally right now what I would be doing is doing my makeup and either watching a video on my phone about it or honestly talking out loud to myself about it. So I figured I'm gonna film it and you guys can give me some conversation, some feedback, so it's not exactly like I'm talking to myself. So today we're gonna be talking about Meredith Kercher and Amanda Knox. Gotta get our skin prepped for makeup. So I wanted to start with a little bit about Meredith because the documentary that I'm going to be talking about is the one on Netflix that is called Amanda Knox. Maybe there's some other like subtitle, but I know that the main big text that you see is Amanda Knox. Now, the documentary is not called Meredith, it's not called The Tragedy in Italy, it's called Amanda Knox. So it shouldn't be surprising that what you hear the most about is Amanda Knox. But they just don't give any attention at all to Meredith at all. Not even, I mean, you see her on camera, I think twice from like old footage. So I was like, you know, let's let Meredith have a moment because she deserves it. On the documentary, the first thing that is a standout thing to me about Meredith is the fact that she's gorgeous. I mean, she's truly stunning. She looks so friendly and just warm and inviting. And I tried to find some articles or just anything that would give me more information on her, and I only found a few, but definitely her friends are like, yeah, she's popular, she's warm and inviting for sure, is the impression that I get. This, I will say this as well, obviously these are just things that I tried to like Google and find, so I don't know the validity of them. A few were on like a college's website which I feel like should be reputable. But from what I can gather, Meredith was on her way to possibly be a journalist, and she studied history and that kind of thing in college. Friends called her Mez, which I think is a super cute nickname. And I think she was also studying European politics. And anyways, diverse lady she was. What's kind of like poetic to me in a way is she studied or was maybe going to be a journalist, and her dad actually wrote a book called Meredith. And I think that's kind of sweet that in the end it was like maybe she was gonna be writing, but her dad ended up writing for her. I thought that was kind of special. So something else that I think is telling of kind of the person that Meredith was, the profits from the book that her dad wrote called Meredith were donated to a charity in Meredith's name, and also there was a scholarship fund started, and I think it ended up paying for like 2 months of classes for a British student, if I'm remembering right. And her sister actually said that that was very much in line with what Meredith would kind of want. So obviously it's easy to take away that Meredith was a super caring and nice and giving person. So kind of how I wrote things down, I have 3 pages of notes, but I kind of just wrote things that were standout things to me. So I guess that's how I'm going to go through and discuss these. You guys are going to have to bear with me as far as the structure of these videos because I'm not totally sure how to do them quite yet. So I watched this case one time quite a while ago, and I was like 100% she's guilty. I mean, made up my mind super quick that Amanda did it, and there just was no question for me. I guess I'm not using any lotion on my face today. So basically my perception of the case the first time was really skewed towards Amanda did it, and the whole time it was looking for what else could condemn Amanda as a guilty party. I watched it that first time, and then I never watched it again because I felt like I didn't need to. Amanda was guilty. But for some reason it struck me again about 2 weeks ago to watch it again. And one of the things that still I remembered from the first time of watching it was how odd she was and how odd she acted. That was something that everybody talked about, was her weird behavior. And so I was like, I have an idea where I'm gonna watch through this and put myself in the shoes of, I'm just an awkward person, and see how things look. I can tell you this, it still looks weird. Maybe less weird? I don't know. So again, let me emphasize, I'm not really going over step by step the case. I'm kind of just doing a little review of it. So if you haven't seen it, it's going to be really helpful if you have seen it. So one of the first things I found super odd right from the beginning, and this is when I was like, oh yeah, 100% she's guilty. So Amanda spent the night at her very new boyfriend's house, Raffaele, and Raphael, I think, if you're American. She comes home and the front door is like not broken down, I guess. They didn't make it seem like foul play from the door being open, just that the door was open. Well, maybe I'm crazy, but if I got home to somewhere I was staying, whether it was my permanent residence, whether I was just there on vacation, anything, roommate or not, unless I literally saw my roommate going from their car to the house bringing in groceries and that's why the door was open, I would immediately not go into the place. I just feel like that is enough to be creepy to me. I wouldn't go in. Amanda goes in, washes her hands, I think she takes a shower, and just kind of doesn't seem to notice that anything looks super out of the norm. She notices a little blood here and there, and I mean, again, maybe I'm a paranoid person, but at the first thing I would be out, but then if I for some reason went in the house and then saw blood anywhere, I would think something's definitely going on, right? So what I think was the absolute major downfall for Amanda Knox, if she was truly not guilty, was this. She goes in the house and looks around. Nothing seems out of the place, out of the ordinary for her until it does. But instead of calling Italy's form of 911, which is 112, she calls Raphael. I think that just, the only reason that I think that would not be super suspicious and weird, a weird thing to do, is if you did not know the number in the state, in the country that you were in for 911. Like if I'm out of town and I have no idea how to contact the authorities, yeah, I'm gonna have to call someone. Tell me how do I do this? How do I call someone? But she calls and he comes over and they can't get Meredith's door open, and then after they can't get the door open, they call the police. So those are the first two things I think are really super strange about this case. And this isn't necessarily like by the end of this discussion we're going to totally know, you know, obviously we'll never know. But it isn't supposed to be definite in guilty or innocent. It's just interesting facts. I really feel like if she would not have called him, they might not have looked at her so closely, because the first thing you hear, Galini, I believe is the detective's name, the policeman's name from over there. The first thing he says that really caught his eye about Amanda was the fact that once they had called the police and they were all kind of like at the house and everything, her and Raphael were kissing. And he thought that that was really strange behavior. I agree it's strange behavior. I also think I'm someone who I react really poorly in situations. Not poorly, but just, you know, maybe if everybody else is crying, maybe I'm not crying. I remember several instances with my family where somebody would be like, why are you not like crying about this? And I just didn't feel like it warranted me crying. Now, obviously, if my roommate had been killed, I think that I would definitely be in shock and probably not kissing my husband. However, if you're thinking of it like maybe they're cuddling and kissing so that she has some comfort because she's scared, I don't know. I'm just trying to get it from all the angles. I don't really like how my eyebrows look, but they're done. So a few other things that I think are weird. Giuliani, I think is his name, the investigator, one of the things he says in the documentary that I just think is so a really flawed way to think. He says at one point that when they found Meredith, her body was covered with a comforter, and that obviously a woman did that because a man would never think to cover a body. Absolutely, I don't think that that's true. Now, I get kind of maybe what he's thinking, that maybe a woman to woman would have the decency, but also I think that if you're going to be in line with that thinking, you would almost think, well, a woman wouldn't kill another woman. It just doesn't make sense to me to excuse the possibility of a man doing it just because he wouldn't cover the body. I know something that's pretty common in cases is if the victim has had something happen to their neck or to their face, it's more of a personal, usually they surmise that the attacker knew the victim. It's just personal that way. And I think that covering up the body definitely could be something similar. But like I said, I think the idea of excusing kind of a man, to me that just more than anything stated we weren't going to be looking for a man because a woman covered the body. A man wouldn't have covered the body. I think that's flawed thinking. It also seems like that right after he thought Amanda looked suspicious, which was the day that they were there, I believe. Side note, timeline on this is so messy. They don't go into any detail on anyone's timeline at all, basically, which I think would have been really helpful to be able to make your own opinion on it, is if they included timelines better. But Amanda's there, he thinks she looks suspicious, and then you kind of never hear, like, they were looking for all these other people, they were investigating all these other people. It just kind of sounds like, and I know that the documentary is shot in a way to make Amanda look innocent, I think. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. But you just don't hear where they said, we interviewed, you know, everybody in the area, we interviewed blah, blah, blah. It sounds like right when he thought Amanda looked suspicious, she was who did it. No questions asked. I really think probably the biggest injustice of the entire thing, other than the life being lost, genuinely, next thing, is how poorly the crime scene was preserved. I mean, they have on video people walking in and out of the house, everybody touching everything. I don't know what the process is in Italy, but I would assume it's pretty much the same as it's supposed to be everywhere else, which is to preserve the crime scene. You know, they made a point in the documentary to say nobody changed their booties, nobody changed gloves often enough, so it's cross-contamination all over the place. And I think that's so sad because there's so much potential in every single crime scene that it's like you literally just screwed yourself by not preserving it and testing it properly. They even said that when they contacted the lab that they tested the evidence from Meredith's case at, they were asking, like, did you test each thing individually? And they basically said something to the effect of like, well, no, we have other things to work on, we can't do it that way. So I always think that's really sad when you have something that could have clear-cut evidence on it, clear-cut DNA on it, and you just don't treat it properly, because 9 out of 10 times once you test something, that's it. You can't retest it. You can't try again. You can't, you have that one thing to test and then you ruined it, and then there goes your evidence. Something that I think is poorly explained as well, maybe they did have this under wraps somewhere, but the way they explained it definitely was not clear, was what would the motive have been other than Amanda is a crazy person. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm not saying I think that she's innocent. I'm not saying I think that she's guilty. I'm saying the way that it was handled is just baloney. And I mean that the motive was she's a crazy person, that's why, without any evidence that she's a crazy person. They also don't mention in this documentary where Amanda's friends were interviewed, anything, teachers maybe that she had, people that had employed her, anything. They just decided that she was crazy is how it seems. Now, something that is crazy to me is this, that Patrick, who was Amanda's boss in Italy, immediately they said he had something to do with it because of a text exchange between Amanda and him. And he, I think, spent like 4 weeks maybe in jail. Had an alibi, and then they let him go. You never hear about Patrick ever again. It's strange to me that Raphael and Amanda's alibi was they were together at Raphael's apartment. That's their alibi. I don't know how this works if you were together, if your alibi doesn't count, if it's not reliable, I'm not sure. But it's strange to me that they had an alibi, they were together, they weren't there, and everybody seems to just kind of throw that out the window. I think something that's really tricky in this is the fact that they say anything about Amanda's DNA being at the apartment, or the house, or however it's called. Of course it is, she lives there. That's why I feel like preserving those specimens that you had was so important, because it's so much harder to prove or disprove, she was involved, she wasn't involved, because she lives there. Her DNA should be over everything. She's lived there. They include at one point, to prove that Amanda's crazy, Facebook pictures from her and Raphael where Amanda's shooting a gun that's obviously a decommissioned type, what was it? I can't remember what kind of gun it was. Obviously decommissioned, and she's laughing and shooting it. Then they have a picture from Raphael that's obviously a Halloween costume of him dressed like a mummy with a machete, and they're like, there it is, boom. Well, I'm pretty sure when I was 7, there's a picture of me by a cannon at some historic museum, and I've definitely never killed anybody. So I feel like they were grasping at straws, just trying to make the case that they're crazy people, and that's why they did it. Let's just sum up this point by saying the motive, I missed it. If they laid it out clearly, I missed it. So when they get them in to interrogate them, Raphael and Amanda, a few things this time around when I watched it again that I didn't put together the first time. They said, which we don't ever see video of this, I'm not sure if there is video of it, but they said that Amanda was doing cartwheels and stretching and all this while they were waiting, which very much struck me like Jodi Arias, who was doing handstands and basically couldn't wait for the minute that she was out. So lately something I've been into is watching cases of the wrongfully convicted, because I never knew that was such a rampant thing. There's so many of those cases, and really none of them ever see the light of day. If they do, they're quickly dismissed, and then either the person's not guilty and they're like, oh, sorry, we wasted all of your years in prison, good luck, here's $50, go start a new life, or they're convinced they did it and that's all. Knowing that, watching that, kind of studying those cases a little bit more recently, I think definitely you can confess if you're not guilty. The way that they interrogate some of these people, I know that it's the tactic behind it. It does seem rather cruel. If you're interrogated for 15 and 16 hours without a break, you're starting to kind of lose it or whatever. I feel like it's super easy for me and you right now to say, I would never confess to something I did not do, especially if I was going to spend my life in prison. Maybe we would not. I don't know. I've never been in this situation. I don't know how that feels. But I do know that people confess even though they didn't do it all the time. There's another Netflix documentary, I think it's called Exhibit A, that I'm currently going through. I think that's the one of people that, is that what it's called? No, The Innocent Files is the one that I watched. I am watching Exhibit A, but The Innocent Files is chock full of people that say, yeah, I did it, get sentenced, but they didn't do it. I don't know psychologically what happens there, other than like, get me out of here. If I say that I did it, will I just get to go home? I don't know. But what strikes me weird is they both say that they kind of falsely confess to something, Raphael and Amanda, but they implicate one another. So normally I feel like if you falsely confess, you're so far mentally gone at that point that it seems like it's more likely to be like, I don't know. Maybe I was there. Maybe I am forgetting something. Maybe I have blocked it out. It's weirder to me that you would say, yeah, you're right, it did happen. The other person did do it. I didn't do it. I knew about it, but they did it. It's weird that they point the finger to me. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like if you're going to confess and that's not the truth, that you're more likely to be so gone that you would just say, maybe I did do it, not it's likely they did it. I hope you guys are enjoying so far. As a little break from all of this, since I'm like more than halfway done, is I am doing light makeup today. I have one other video to film today. This is just the makeup I've been doing as like my go-to. It's super light, doesn't require a lot, and it gets me in and out of this makeup chair pretty quickly. Alright, so towards the end here, we're introduced to Rudy. Something that's weird to me is even though they don't really have super a lot of evidence to go on, anything to go on, that Raphael and Amanda did something, they search Raphael's apartment. Well, honestly, fine. My thought process always is, if I didn't do anything, come in and check. Like, ain't got nothing on me. But they find a knife that they are convinced is the murder weapon, has Amanda's DNA on the handle, and the first time you hear about it, it has Meredith's DNA on the blade. Closed case, right? She did it. Well, then when they're going back through everything, that's when they figure out that like the amount of evidence, I don't quite understand this, but it's like the amount that's on the blade is not really enough to have like a completely inclusive sample, I guess. I'm not sure how they put it, but basically it wasn't really enough to like basically convict someone on. So the thing about DNA evidence is DNA doesn't lie. It doesn't tell the story you want it to tell. It tells the story of the truth. So it's always strange to me when people go back and retest something and it comes up different. That just draws a lot of suspicion to me, because I don't understand how that happens beyond I want this person to look and feel guilty, so whatever's gonna make that happen. I'm not saying anyone tampered with evidence. I'm just saying it's odd that the second time that they tested it, it would come up so different. Again, kind of seems like reaching for straws, better known as grasping at straws. Anyway, this Rudy guy, he calls someone, and on their recorded phone call, he's like, yeah man, I went to her house. I was there and I went to the bathroom, which lines up with how the scene looked, and then I heard her scream, and I come out and like she'd been cut. Basically his story was he went to the bathroom, and the time he's in the bathroom, someone broke in the house, killed the girl, and then left. And then he comes out. I feel like that does not make sense. How would that have possibly been a thing? Just doesn't add up to me. So here we have Rudy's DNA all over the room, everywhere. And on the phone, he's like, Amanda didn't have anything to do with it. She wasn't there. I was there. Somebody else came in and did it, and I got really scared, so I left. Well, right there, I mean, again, I get maybe your head's in a different space, but if you're not guilty, why wouldn't you have called 112 and said, I don't know what's going on here, can you send help? It just is weird. So they kind of convict him quickly, it feels like, and they're like, okay, yeah, 30 years will do, which I feel like I'm big on like a life for a life, you know? I mean, Meredith was 21 when this happened, and she had a lot ahead of her, so it feels like a slap in the face to me that someone would only get 30 years. Well, then he gets an appeal and he gets it lowered to 16 years. But what's strange is even though his DNA is literally everywhere, they find Amanda and Raphael's DNA like a little in her room, which devil's advocate here is basically how I'm just looking at this stuff. I'm like, again, Amanda lived there, so of course her DNA is going to be everywhere. Raphael, I guess, was walking around the apartment, so it's not completely unbelievable that his DNA would be there. Also weird where the DNA was. I mean, I can see it both ways. But what is strange to me is that you basically have a full-on confession from this Rudy dude, and they're still like, well, what was Amanda's role in it? What was Raphael's role in it? They just really had convinced themselves that they had something to do with it. I think it's weird that they were so gung-ho on finding out how they were related, not if they were related. Involved is what I meant, not related. I also feel like the reporter that they interviewed for this particular documentary it teaches you a lot about journalism and the way that reporters are, because he says several times throughout it, like, I don't know if that was right. I don't know if it was correct. I just didn't want my opponent, you know, the other side of the other newspaper, the other magazine, whatever, to get the story before I did. So I was just putting stuff out as fast as I could. And his point is, well, we were getting the information from somewhere, so it's not our fault if it's not right. So they were just perpetuating the feeding frenzy of Amanda Knox is definitely guilty. You know, whether she was or she wasn't, I think it kind of taints the ability to have a fair and like level-headed case and trial, because by the end of it, trial by media, I mean, everybody is already convinced that she's guilty before she even goes to trial. This is one of the cases that I feel like happens a lot too, where it does not feel like to me that it's innocent until proven guilty. It's the other way around, that you are definitely guilty, now tell me how you aren't, and that's really not how the justice system is supposed to work for anyone. I know this has been a really long video, but I think that's pretty much all my takeaways. So basically the notes on this case, I feel like I was just like writing down, you know what else is weird? You know what strikes me odd? So I hope that it was something interesting to listen to. I really am interested to know what you guys think about this, how you feel like it was handled. And I know I said at the beginning, but just as like a closing statement, I really am interested in these cases for the justice part of it. I think so much. That's why people are getting interested in it now, I think, is because like luckily there's more of it in the public eye, because you're seeing all these people that are going to prison that didn't do anything, that are having terrible things happen to them that didn't do anything, that didn't deserve it, and the system is just, as they say, corrupt. Now, we only know what we are told about stories like this, so for all we know, there's tons of evidence that we didn't see that they were like really, you know, they felt like they could have convicted them on. I don't know. What I do know is it's really sad for Meredith that, as I said, the scene wasn't preserved better, that they had all these opportunities to test so many areas and couldn't because they conducted a really messy investigation. I mean, I feel like we should have even been hearing like we tested all the doorknobs and, you know, there was a broken window in the room. Well, there was nothing ever said about that other than the main investigator in this saying it was definitely staged. You know, he thought Amanda had staged it, so it was definitely staged. I had Dustin watch it with me the second time, and he never watches things like that with me. And he was like, it just doesn't make sense that they're like gung-ho that these people did it, but there's like nothing to back that up. I hope that cases are hard, because when it's something like this, eventually at the end of the day, the people who know what happened is the person who did it, or persons who did it, the person who it was done to. That's it. And so now, who knows? Amanda is not in prison. Raphael is not in prison. I think something that's extra sad that goes along with it is when it's something like this where it isn't just you're a suspect, now let's prove your innocence, right? And you're like, absolutely, let's go through it and prove my innocence. No problem. When it's years and years and years of being in the public eye, and it's like, for sure you're guilty, we're just trying to pin it on you. Like, we're just trying to get the final piece of evidence to pin it on you. These people are not in prison right now, which means you're trying to get a job. And I'm sure there's some question on there about, have you been to prison? Have you been to jail? Like anything like that. And you have to explain, yeah, I went to jail for murder, but I didn't do it. Nobody is going to want to be associated with you. So I think it's so sad when things fall through the cracks like this, and then people that maybe are innocent go on with their life and then have to live with this and can't do anything, don't have any opportunities. There's people that go to prison that are wrongfully convicted on little evidence, if any, and then they get out and they don't know how to start over. The whole entire thing is sad. I think that's going to conclude my first Forensics Friday. I hope that the way that I was able to talk about these things were done in a respectful manner. Obviously, you guys know this is just like opinion and talking and what ifs, not at all, obviously, facts and for reals and definites. I'm interested to know your thoughts on the case. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, watch it and then tell me what you think. If there's another case that you guys think I should watch, I probably have already seen it, but comment down below and let me know and I can be talking about it. I haven't decided if this will be every single Friday. Probably not. It'll probably be like maybe once a month, maybe a few more times if you guys are super interested. But let me know down below what you thought about it. And yeah, I hope that you guys enjoy your weekend and that this wasn't like a downer, that it's something interesting to you. I love, like I said, the forensics, the DNA, the trial, the justice system. I love watching all of it. Not when it fails, but when it goes correctly, it's amazing. So anyways, I'm gonna get going. Thank you guys for watching and I'm gonna see you guys in a few days. Bye.